Right, hi everybody. I just wanted to do a quick video on my time at Bempton Cliffs earlier in the year. So I was really fortunate with the weather. Let's move that out of the way. And we had relatively clear skies, so I arrived in the car park at 3 a.m. And as I made my way towards the cliff on the left hand side, the sun had already started to change the colour in the sky. So already just after 3 a.m., I think it was around June I went, the sky had already started changing colour, so by the time I got to the cliff, it was in shade and the gannets were pretty low um, on the cliff. The reason was that the wind just hadn't picked up, so you can't have everything, I guess, in terms of conditions. But I went down there and I decided to do something a little bit different and abstract. I used my wide angle lens, I leaned over and I rested it on the barrier, held it as tightly as I could, and took the shot at a fraction of a second. So I like the movement, and I had some where there were some well-defined gannets in the frame because they were hovering, but they ended up being more distractions. So I decided to show everybody this particular version because it's purely about pattern for me, I think. Unfortunately, the wind just didn't pick up, so I didn't get the gannets against the red sky as I'd hoped. But again, it gave me an opportunity to experiment. So I put my 2x on my 7200 and zoomed out during a slow shutter exposure. And with this one, I decided to put the clouds in the middle to act as a focal point. But the experimentation continued. I never got the conditions I wanted, so or had hoped for, and this gannet was hovering, so I decided to focus on it, keep the camera as steady as I could, and I opted for a slow shutter speed to blur the gannets around it that were going to and from the cliff. It took a lot of shots to get this, and I decided to include this frame in my slideshow because none of the other gannets are overlapping the one that's relatively well defined. Eventually the sun did come up, but the gannets didn't seem to be playing ball at that time, so I just enjoyed the sunrise for myself. Beautiful morning. But fortunately, to my right hand side, there was a protruding part of cliff where some gannets had landed, and because the sun was relatively low in the sky, it casted a lovely shadow over them. Um, the cliff behind was in shade, so I was able to underexpose and turn that into pure black. And to be honest, I had to underexpose anyway because of the white of the feathers, but it really simplified my shots and I could focus more on shape and the postures they were making. Uh, with this one, I like the little bit of light in the eye, and I just wish that the beak was, I guess, parallel to the frame. But it did happen eventually. I did get the shots that I'd pre-visualized. Now, as the sun rose behind the birds, the sea was lit up into a lovely yellow-orange colour. This one I've added a bit of saturation just for aesthetic purposes. So it's a nice standard silhouette, but I actually prefer this one. And the reason is, yes, it's out of focus. I did that intentionally, and I guess it's more of a personal image. It's not going to be to everyone's taste, but when we remember certain moments in life, most of our memories, most of my memories at least, are vague and hazy. I don't remember seeing the gannets, in fine detail, silhouetted against the sea. It's kind of a hazy, dreamy sort of memory, and this image mimics that. So perhaps why this appeals to me more. Now, this is a suggestion of what I did a little bit later on in the slideshow. So you can see the diffusion closest to the gannet, and there's blades of grass even, sorry, cutting through it. This is a technique that I learned during wedding photography, and if you place something close to the lens and you get some lovely diffusion like this, it'll mirror inside the bokeh balls. So those are blades of grass that are quite close to my lens, but I decided that I could use that as a theme for these images. I had a really unique situation and I was in a really experimental mood. Please excuse the dodgy stability. So this one was taken with two 2x converters at 1600mm, just to get as much detail as I could, and I had to manually focus. Now you can see what I was thinking here. So I had flowers in front of the lens, and they created some lovely shapes in the diffusion in the bokeh, but what I'd actually really been hoping for was that a gannet, a male, would pick up some flowers in its beak, because that would have really it would have mirrored what was in the bokeh balls and would have created something really beautiful. It does have a little bit of grass. I don't know if that counts, but that's what I was hoping for, and I did get something towards the end of the slideshow. This is again an image that I really like. I guess it's because I know what it is and I was there and I can relate to it. So it was a gannet just preening its feathers with my diffusion technique happening in the background with the flowers. I intentionally put it out of focus, and there's something about this, and I can't really put my finger on it, the dreaminess, the mood, the feeling I'm getting from this. So perhaps it's just a personal preference, but I like it. Lifted the shadows up in this one, and three always seems to work in composition, unless it's two. So this was the shot that I really wanted to get. So again, it with some foliage in its beak, and I wanted to mirror that in the diffusion. It didn't quite happen. It didn't pick up flowers. I told it to, but it just didn't pick up any flowers. But I think this is the closest we're going to get in a while. But it is just something that I thought of beforehand and while I was there, recalling my time from wedding photography, just to create something different and something beautiful. Again, this was with a couple of converters, and I moved it in and out of focus, and I noticed it created a nice texture in the sea. So I decided to include this one. Yeah, I know the Gannet's not in sharp focus, but I'm a really big fan of the Impressionist painters, and they didn't always capture the maximum amount of detail. They left a dreamy feel to their images, and that's why I decided to include this. Eventually the sun started coming up, and I started to get more traditional shots of the gannets against the sea, gulls returning to the cliff, using a bit of panning and motion blur. But I really love using the 400 2.8. I've mentioned it to death in my blogs, but the reason is that I don't think it's people describe it as a sports lens, a fast lens for freezing motion. I see it as an artistic lens, because you can really pull people's focus and attention to a particular part of the scene, because it's really selective and just knocks out the background into this lovely blur. It's a pain to hold though. this was a pretty funny moment because as Kitty Wakes, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a bit of commotion going on in the nest below, and it was a gannet chick that was just causing havoc with its mother. It was just going in between its legs, running around in circles, and flapping its wings, its little wings, trying to take off. Mother had a right bit of trouble keeping it, under control. But lovely light, the sun was still coming up at this stage. And that concludes my little talk. You gotta take a selfie in this day and age. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope this has been enjoyable for everybody, and please feel free to leave some comments and ask any questions. Always happy to answer, and hope to see everybody soon. Bye.